far. And here he was celebrating. He was, of course, you're not familiar with him. He's a clergy that lives in the UK. And there was a case that was in court regarding child trafficking. And now he has been exonerated. And that's why he's being celebrated here by his relative. That is the story that you want to follow on page 9 of the Star this morning. Let's see what the People Daily is holding for us. Security for Raila allies withdrawn. Tug of war. Kindiki says politicians won't enjoy protection while breaking the law. Top police commanders meet ahead of demos. Officers warn at protest wearing down personnel. Azimio vows mass action on. This story continues on page 4 and 5. We have bites here. Let's see what Raila Odinga is saying. Starting on Wednesday, be ready for the game-changing Maandamano. And in also the crosses as well as James Orengo, Gladys Wanga, we have also Chilo Ayako and Matthews Owilis. That is some of the leaders who are in the government's crosshairs as far as these demonstrations are concerned. On the side, by shot in the arm for Kisumu Top Hospital after Nyong'o goes under the knife. Right, of course, he spoke, I should say, quite glowingly after undergoing the operation there from the Kisumu Referral Hospital. You can read all the story there on page 3 of the People Daily this morning. Now there are changes at the KTDA, and we have a new chair right now, and that is after Munya was kicked out as KTDA boss. Boardroom changes said to be part of Kenya Kwanza plan to clean up tea sector. And Jue is a man right now. You can read all about him inside the People Daily on page 16. It's a miracle in quotes there for Deya as he walks to freedom. After I've said this case took a glacial slowness over the years, and right now is a free man. And of course, flanked by his lawyers and his supporters there, and giving a statement as well. Imetosha. This is what Taifa Leo is holding for us. Imetosha. Enough is enough. Tahariri. That is an editorial there. And you can read the story on page 2 of the Taifa Leo today. Sitaki nusu mkate sasa asema Raila. He's not interested at all at a handshake or a coalition government. And we can see some of the leaders, viongozi wa muungano wa Azimio la Umoja, wakiongozwa na Senator wa Nairobi Edwin Sifuna, wazungumza na wanahabari katika wakfu ya Jaramogi Odinga Nairobi jana. You can read the rest of the story on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Also the sidebar, vifo vya Shakahola vyafika 400. The number keeps rising. That story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Onanagu moja ndani ya Trafford. You can follow that story on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Serikali bila watetezi wakali. That is also on page 3. Wadadisi wa siasa wasema Kenya Kwanza haina wajuzi kama Michuki Matiang'i kutekeleza sera. Alright, that story continues on page 3. Isaac Mora will tell us what he thinks about that particular statement. Kenya Kwanza haina wajuzi kama Michuki Matiang'i kutekeleza sera. That story continues on page 3 of Taifa Leo this morning. And Raia ashtaki Raila Uhuru, ataka vinara wa Azimio wafidie hasara na kukomesha maandamano zaidi. As I've mentioned, yes, there's a man who's moved to court to challenge these demonstrations, and somebody has to be responsible, and he says that is Honorable Raila Odinga, right? Honorable Raila Odinga and former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Ezekiel Odera akosa nyota Tanzania. That is a story that you want to follow on page 3. Pastor Ezekiel, polisi wasitisha crusade yake Arusha wakisema anahusishwa na mauaji. And of course this is attached to the Shakahola tragedy that seems also to be shadowing around him and following him as well. And that story continues on page 5 of Taifa Leo this morning. Let's move on and see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. It says Kenya plans new 140 billion shilling syndicated loan facility. Kenya plans new 140 billion shilling syndicated loan facility. Trade and Development Bank to arrange new facility. Move comes days after closing similar 70.8 billion shillings loan. This is bound to also raise the cost of loans in the country, being a syndicated loan. You can read all about this inside the Business Daily today. And of course, also illustration of how top external creditors to Kenyan have been dishing out the money, or how it has been actually flowing, owing to Trade and Development Bank accounted for 4.6% of total external debt. That story continues, as I've mentioned, on page 2 of the Business Daily. Enough is enough. This is a comment there that you can follow on page 10 of the Business Daily, the editorial pages, an editorial from the Daily Nation that is running across the dailies today. Enough is enough. Stop beating the war drums. This is a clarion call for the two leaders to hearken to what the Wananchi is saying right now, that they need a conducive, peaceful environment for them to continue with their lives of peace, continue with their businesses, continue with their learning, continue with their living. And we owe it to two of them to try to see how they can break this particular stalemate that we are embroiled in as a country right now, and to diffuse the tension